Welcome to Pharmacy View podcast, where we provide regular interviews with pharmacists and key people within Australian pharmacy and the associated global industry. In this stream of podcast episodes, we discuss with our guests the full scope of leadership tools that go into building the pharmacy leaders toolbox for team and career success. I am your host, Chantelle Turner, pharmacist, leadership coach, and founder of Turn Pharmacy Leadership. My guest today is proudly brought to you by Shopfront Solutions for all your shelf and digital marketing needs, part of the Arion Technologies Group.
So I look up to some of my friends, pharmacy leaders, and look at the amazing teams that they've managed to build. And I won't name them for fear that by naming some of them I'll miss some of the other ones who are so important. But we've certainly learnt a lot from our peers and from our friends. And in turn, I hope that we and our team have been able to inspire some other teams to perhaps change a little bit of what they do and adopt some of what we do and build some of their own, just as we've managed to do. So our team in the pharmacy is very culturally diverse, and we find that for us, that's a wonderful strength. I know that I haven't always thought that would be the case, but it certainly is a strength for us. And I think that brings that realisation that there's far more that unites us than divides us. And I think that realisation can come through to pharmacists, whether we be pharmacy owners, pharmacy managers, or pharmacists just getting in there in their earliest part of their careers and feeling like they're reporting to everybody, but not really have the ability to set their own day. I think there's far more that unites us than divides us. And I think when we remember that is when we're really working at our best.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I am so excited that I have Curtis Ruhnau here with me. He's a pharmacy owner. He's a passionate community pharmacist. He's also the president of the Pharmacists Support Service. And his pharmacy has had the absolute honour of being the 2024 Harm Minimisation Pharmacy of the Year and also the 2024 Community Engagement Pharmacy of the Year. And while I would love to get into talking about those things specifically, I think Curtis and I have a much more important conversation to have in terms of the humans, the people within pharmacy, and how we can support them and optimise work environments for the benefits of individuals, the teams and the businesses as well. So welcome so much, Curtis. It is so good to have you here.
Thanks so much, Chantelle. Yeah, look, it's great to be here doing this with you after trying to plan it for so long to actually sit down and catch up.
Yes, it has been a long while coming, but I think it's going to be well worth the wait, so that's good. So you have been on many a podcast, many a webinar, and have discussed about your time in pharmacy. So for those of you who haven't heard you on other platforms, give us a brief recap about your pharmacy story and maybe share something that our audience might not know about you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I suppose for those of you who haven't heard, I live and breathe and bleed community pharmacy. I've never really wanted to be anything else. A little bit about me that people probably didn't know. My first job was as a shop assistant in a hardware store that doesn't exist anymore. And I realised that I liked working with the public. And if you'd asked me at the time at age 15, 16 what I wanted to be a mad scientist with a lab coat and crazy hair. And I had an interaction with our community pharmacist. And from that point, I realised that he was a man who was working with the public, which was something I realised I liked to do. And he was using science in his interaction with the public as well. And from that point, I've never really wanted to be anything else except a community pharmacist. And while I appreciate that there are a lot of people out there doing jobs that I can't do, I really love where we are and what we do as community pharmacists. And Margaret and I, my wife is a pharmacist and a partner in the business as well, and we describe ourselves as chronic care specialists. And our chronic care actually extends over years with our patients. And we get to know them and they get to know us. And we get to know the subtlety in the communication that we have, where a patient might come in and say to you that they have something that's going wrong, and you realise this patient isn't one that normally complains about anything. And you realise you need to sit up and listen to that patient because there's something that's happening that they really need help with. So, been a pharmacy owner for 24 years. I've been president of Pharmacists Support Service for coming up for 12 months now. Spent a little bit of time as PDL director for New South Wales and ACT as well, and realised that what I really love to do is help people, and what I really get to do is get to help other pharmacists, which I suppose is, for me, it's the ultimate of helping other people, is helping other pharmacists who then get to be able to help other people as well.
Oh, beautiful. Really paying it forward there. You touched on something there around, the ultimate is for you to be able to help other pharmacists. And it was actually my next question on my list. You are clearly a huge advocate for mental health and effective leadership in pharmacy that allows all pharmacists to thrive. Where does that passion come from?
I don't know. I suppose for anybody who knew me some years ago, they would be absolutely stunned that self-awareness was something that I was promoting, because it was definitely not a strength of mine over a very, very long period of time. But I used to be a tutor for med students. So these people, many of them are doctors now. And the program was called Personal and Professional Development. And in first semester, in first year, we did a tutorial on self-awareness, on peer support, on understanding and helping each other. And I realised that as pharmacists, we never got that. And I suppose that's what really started me down this path. And at about the time that I stopped doing that, I became a PDL director and started to try to push that. And it's really just been an extension of that I've ended up working with Pharmacists Support Service, put my hand up to be the PDL representative on the PSS board. And then when the long-serving president stepped down, I put my hand up last year. So I suppose there's a fairly clear line through that, and there's been some other things along the way, but that's really where it's come to and where it's come from.
Yeah. It's interesting. As you know, I've got a emotional intelligence background beyond being a pharmacist, and within the first kind of 5-6 minutes of our speech, you've touched on self-awareness, key awareness of others in terms of your chronic care speciality in community pharmacy, and also inspiring others as well. So you can see that there's this intrinsic link, I guess, that's spanning through different facets of your pharmacy career as well. So you said that, this is all kind of culminated in your, I guess, coming into the role in Pharmacist Support Services, which I know you've been involved in for a while now, beyond these last almost 12 months in the president's role. Yes. In terms of what you're seeing in PSS, in terms of the front line, in terms of, where pharmacists may be struggling, are there any themes that are tending to come up at this point in time?
Look, there certainly are. Loneliness is a big one. And I know that we've, as a profession, we've started to focus on how pharmacists can help other people get through their loneliness. And we know that through the worst of COVID, that pharmacy was one of very few touch points that the community had. And I know when you spoke to Carly Johnston, you spoke about some of this as well. And I think you and Maria Cooper had a bit of a discussion about this too. I think that's good, and we're outward focusing, but a lot of us are feeling a lot of loneliness as well. And we're feeling unsupported. We're coming into a very new area where we don't even know what pharmacy is going to look like. Many of us, we haven't experienced what full scope actually looks like, either from a practitioner's point of view or from the community's point of view. So we're really in this difficult situation where we're looking to find out. We don't like uncertainty, and that's difficult for us to deal with. It's difficult to sit and be uncertain about something which is so critical to our sense of self. And I am a pharmacist. I describe myself as a pharmacist, and so I connect little pieces of myself with that particular part of me. And so not knowing what a pharmacist will be in 10 years' time is a little bit troubling with that, connecting that sense of self. Who am I going to be? And that's what we find coming through. Of course, stress and workload and uncertainty and relationships at work, they're all themes that we see coming through with PSS as well. And we see that coming through time and time again. And that it's a big theme that we see with the calls coming through.
Yeah. So from your perspective, and this might be through your perspective through PSS or your boots on the ground in your pharmacy, how are you approaching this uncertainty? Because you're right, there is so much uncertainty, and something for us to feel safe is to feel more certain. So how are you supporting, I guess, yourself and others through these, I guess, uncertain times?
I suppose the start of that is just acknowledging and feeling the uncertainty and realising that that's where it comes from. And then just speaking it, actually giving voice to those feelings and saying to the team, we don't exactly know what this is going to mean. We don't know how much the university course will cost. And as I sit here, we're a week and a bit out from the New South Wales Health Minister's announcement that pharmacists in New South Wales will be able to practice to full scope. But we don't know what the training course will cost. We know for our Queensland counterparts that the cost was covered, largely subsidised through a scheme which we would love to think that will be replicated, but we simply have no certainty about that at the moment at all. So we don't know what that's going to look like. And so what we've done with our team is say, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, and let's just have a discussion. And if anybody hears anything before we do, please let us know. And if we hear anything before you, we'll let you know as well. And I suppose it's just being able to sit with that uncertainty and be okay with not having all the answers.
Yeah.
And as a boss, that doesn't feel good to not have the answers.
Yeah, and it must be hard, especially when, it's clear how much you love helping other people and also want to support your team as well. There was something else that you just touched on there too, and I guess I'm stepping back a little bit, but you said self-awareness. I'm curious, when it comes to this uncertainty, how much, I guess, leadership of self in terms of, having those, I guess, conversations with yourself and being able to be confident in where you are now, how much does that impact on your capacity to manage this uncertainty?
I think starting by acknowledging that that's actually what's happening is that there's this uncertainty that we're dealing with. I think that's the start of it, and everything else can flow from that as long as you understand that that's why you're feeling that. And it, I've spent a long time trying to avoid feeling how I feel sometimes. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to turn the radio off in the car and drive home. And for me, my commute is a half an hour. And sitting for a half an hour with just me and my thoughts is something that I never would have done in the past. But it's something that I do from time to time now when I feel like there's a lot to process. And I find that if I don't, that those thoughts, whatever they are, can creep in through the day and can really in some ways derail my day. And I find that if I can recognise that that's what's happening, that I need a bit of time, that time in the car where I just sit and go through and try and unpack those thoughts, that's the start of it. And as with so many things, Chantelle, and I know we've spoken about this sort of thing in the past, it's not about the end point, it's about making a start. And the end point that you think you want to get to is almost never the end point that you get to. And I never would have believed that we would have been capable of being Harm Minimisation Pharmacy of the Year. And there are a number of reasons how that happened, but it all started from being connected to a local alcohol and other drug service and saying, how can we help? And knowing that most of the people that would connect with an AOD service would have needed to connect with a community pharmacy. And some of those connections would be good and some of those connections not so good. But knowing that those people would need a connection with a community pharmacist and trying to advocate for our profession in that space. And that can be tiring, that feeling like you constantly need to advocate in some way, either for our profession or for our business or for ourselves. That can be really tiring. And again, I know you've spoken a lot with Carly Johnston about exactly this sort of thing, about how tiring advocating for yourself can be. But I think that's where it's come from. And so not knowing where that end point is not necessarily a big problem. It's knowing that there's a starting point that you need to acknowledge and then just pick up your feet and start moving from there.
Such great advice and so practical about using your drive home to have some space to be able to unpack those thoughts. And you speak about Carly Johnston, and I love her analogy of unpacking the backpack. In terms of, we through the day when we are advocating for, ourselves, our business, our patients, we're continually putting things in our backpack, and that backpack can get really, really heavy unless we take time to consciously unpack that. And sometimes, we can unpack it really quickly, and other times takes a little bit more effort and a little bit more self-care in doing it as well. I love how you said that it's not really about the end point, it's about the start. So in terms of pharmacy leaders, if there's people out there that are listening to this, and maybe not even just pharmacy leaders, pharmacists in themselves, what other tips would you have for them for, finding their own starting point?
For us, it's always come, and this is, when I say us, it's Margaret and me, and then obviously the team that we've built up in the pharmacy. But for us, it's always been a case of that old maxim of never seeing a need without trying to do something about it. And that doesn't mean that you're going to have the answers to what that something is, but it just means that you can identify that there's a need and I've seen that there's a need, and so who better than me to make a start? And maybe the start that I need to make is actually to find another expert who can really put their shoulder to the wheel and actually help get this along the line. Other times it's just about upskilling yourself and trying to work through imposter syndrome and realise that we're all making it up as we go along, and that's okay. And imposter syndrome for me often is a bit of a kick in the pants saying that you need to upskill. And if I upskill, I can assuage some of that imposter syndrome. And I had an example of that where I put my hand up at the local AOD service, which is called Marin Wajali, and I volunteered to be a part of their Overdose Awareness Day. And I realised I didn't know much about overdose. So I needed to research about overdose, about naloxone, about what the stats really were and how pharmacists can get involved in that. And it worked really well. It was a great day, and I've been back and presented at Overdose Awareness Day and was back there only 2 and a bit weeks ago doing it again in 2024. And we're now at a point where they invite me along every year. And this year I got to be the lead-off speaker, which was a nice thing to do. And so that's, once again, a long answer to a short question, but there you go. That's one of my specialties.
No, but I think it's really interesting to hear your thought process in that as well. You know, even starting off with, not walking past a problem, being able to say, well, why can't it be me as part of the solution as well? And, not letting those fears hold you back, because you're right. We're all in the same boat and we're all terrified and we're all making it up as we go along. I want to shift pace for a little bit, Curtis, and you're such a huge advocate for our profession, for your business, for harm minimisation, for, Indigenous healthcare. You seem to be the face of so many things, which we as a pharmacy profession are incredibly... No, we are incredibly grateful. How do you take care of yourself through all of this? Because it's a lot of advocating, and I hear a lot of others in this, but not a lot of Curtis.
So the answer is, I suppose, like most of us, I take care of myself patchily, and I don't think any of us does almost anything by ourselves. I don't really believe that there's any such thing as a self-made man, if there ever was. I think there have always been mentors and friends and advocates all the way along the way. So I talk about our team, but we've had some really rough times over the last 4 years. And there have been times when our team has gone, right, you two need to get out of here, talking to Margaret and to me. Go home, do whatever you do when you're not here, and we've got this. And we've taken it on their faith that they do got this, and that we can just leave the pharmacy and our wonderful community in their hands and come back home and look after ourselves. As far as what I do to unplug, I do a little bit of very amateur woodwork. I run stupid distances for fun. I play a little bit of music. I do a few different things, and then just I drive. I love driving, always loved driving. I think if you cut me open, I would bleed petrol. And I also love donating blood or plasma. It's plasma at the moment. So I find that that's a really nice way that you can get out and help other people as well. And Nepean Lifeblood Donor Centre is one of my happy places, and I'm there About as often as I can be, which is everything up to about every 2 weeks that you can donate plasma. And it's a nice way to get out, get some time. There's nothing much else that you can do while you're plugged into a plasma machine. So I might read a book or doom scroll through Facebook. But I just find that that's a really nice way to unplug as well. So there's lots of different things that I might do depending on the day and how much energy I have or don't have.
Yeah, and I think that's a real key point too. You know, it's going to be relevant to your energy levels as well. It shouldn't be forced, but having such a breadth of different interests and ways to recharge gives you the opportunity to do what's right for you at the right time as well. So, if we come back to your role in PSS, and you've spoken about just then how incredible your team has been able to notice when you and Margaret need a bit of time out and has told you to pack your bags and go home and reset. How do you think the profession as a whole, or how do you think leaders as a whole in community pharmacies could be fostering those types of relationships or those types of... Hold on, Curtis, I'm going to rephrase that question. In terms of your, in your role of PSS and thinking about how you have seen that your pharmacists have and your team have supported you and Margaret in your challenging times, collectively, how well do you think that pharmacies across the country are doing that to support their pharmacy teams?
Look, I think there's a bit of a spectrum of that. I think there are some teams that are really well meshed as a team. I think there are some teams that could do with a bit of work. And I think there are some pharmacy owners that are really well connected with how everybody's going and how the pharmacy's going. And I think there are some pharmacy owners that are not quite there yet. As far as leadership goes, I have to say, I think the leaders of our profession, and particularly I'm thinking of the last 12 to 18 months when we've been looking down the barrel of 60-day dispensing and what that would mean, as devastating as that could have been for our profession. When I've reached out to Trent Toomey or Anthony Tassoni or Faye Sim and said, please ask people to check in on each other, they've been very willing to do that and incorporated that in some of the webinars. So I think that's been wonderful to know that they're willing to take that suggestion and jump on board with it. I think that's been fantastic. As far as teams and pharmacists and pharmacies go, again, I think, Chantelle, it's a work in progress, as it is for so many of us. I look up to some of my friends, pharmacy leaders, and look at the amazing teams that they've managed to build. And I won't name them for fear that by naming some of them, I'll miss some of the other ones who are so important.
Yeah.
But we've certainly learnt a lot from our peers and from our friends. And in turn, I hope that we and our team have been able to inspire some other teams to perhaps change a little bit of what they do and adopt some of what we do and build some of their own, just as we've managed to do. So our team in the pharmacy is very culturally diverse, and we find that for us, that's a wonderful strength. I know that I haven't always thought that would be the case, but it certainly is a strength for us. And I think that brings that realisation that there's far more that unites us than divides us. And I think that realisation can come through to pharmacists, whether we be pharmacy owners, pharmacy managers, or pharmacists just getting in there in their earliest part of their careers and feeling like they're reporting to everybody, but not really have the ability to set their own day. I think there's far more that unites us than divides us. And I think when we remember that is when we're really working at our best.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. And at the end of the day, we're all human, and we all have these key needs that we all need to be met, irrespective of our cultural differences as well.
I describe myself as a needy person. And I had a colleague say, "Oh, Curtis, I don't know whether you really should be using the word needy. There's lots of negative connotations in the word needy." And my answer to that is that if me describing myself as needy allows somebody else to actually feel that, that they might actually have needs, and which is the very definition of being needy, and then seek to get those needs met. I think if me being able to speak and say the word needy rather than using a euphemism, I think that then hopefully gives other people the permission to feel it and then to go about getting those needs met. So that's a little bit, again, that's probably been hard won over a number of years, but I feel like that's something that I need to be able to say for other people to be able to feel it.
Yes, absolutely. And, we can't be what we can't see. And being able to label it so clearly like that, I think, is incredible. And it kind of leads into the question that I was just about to ask, which was, if some pharmacists haven't been so lucky to have seen these high-performing, well-gelled teams that you speak of, that, your colleagues and mentors have created in that, what types of key elements would you suggest that they begin to, I guess, consider or explore in terms of designing these teams?
Wow, that's a big question, isn't it?
It's a huge question.
I suppose that the first thing really is support. It's a huge question. I think it's support, Chantelle. I think that's the biggest thing is, and understanding when you need support and being able to ask for that support, but also being able to reach out and see that somebody else needs support, and realizing that by reaching out to somebody else that you're actually going to get a nice little endorphin boost out of that as well, and realize that you're going to do that. So I suppose it comes back to being able to say, I can see that that's what needs to happen, and maybe it's me who needs to start that process. I think we just have a conversation with our friends. What do we do well? What could we do better? And then looking and seeing. And I find conferences incredibly valuable, not necessarily for the planned content that's there, but for the catch-ups that I have with friends, with colleagues that I may have communicated with numerous times and never actually met face to face, and being able to have that first conversation face to face, and with people that we've never met so far, and realizing that we can learn so much from each other. So I think that's a really valuable thing. So trying to, and then just start. I think that's the big part, is that we just, again, we start, and it might start with a little thing like having a day at work. And it might be World Pharmacist Day, where somebody comes along and brings cakes and says, you know what, we all made it through another year. Let's celebrate the fact that we're all still standing and we're all still a team and we're all here together. So it could be as simple as just starting those little traditions for yourself, for your team, those things that matter to you. And it could be the local show day, which is a big thing for everybody, and everybody focuses outside and on all the visitors that are coming in for the local show. But it might be the opportunity to really just focus on the team and say, right, well, we're going to be really busy, but we're going to get through this just like we got through everything else, and celebrate that.
I think that you have just encapsulated at least my personal perspective on what leadership is. You don't need to be the keeper of all knowledge. You need to find the way and have the skills to be able to find where to start, and to be able to find ways to include your team to be able to find these solutions as well. And I think the more that we can invest in all pharmacists, all pharmacy assistants, anyone working in pharmacy, to have these tools to be able to know how to have the conversations around to ask for support, and how to notice and encourage people to, ask when they need that support in return. All of a sudden, there's not silos of information anymore. We combat the loneliness issue in terms of people feeling that they're alone, and the uncertainty that you spoke about before. And then we start to resolve these challenges together. And I only within the last few hours did a coaching session, and we were actually talking about how do we create belonging in our team so that they feel supported enough that they can speak up, and we can speak up to them as well. And we actually spoke about cakes and things like that as well. So, there's a great synergy there. And
Cakes are good, but I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because the cakes are great, but I actually think you have the perfect example for me, which comes in the form of breaking down the boxes. And that's an article that you've got on your website where you talk about a team meeting, and you said, tell us what the pain points are. And somebody said, when I've got to break down all the boxes, and it'll only take a few seconds for everybody to break down one box as they throw it into the pile, I think that then helps that person to feel seen. It's not much to ask of everybody else. And it's that real sense of connection that we all get. So I think that's where that comes in as well, that we really, sometimes it's such a little thing and it costs us so little. In fact, it costs us nothing, but it makes such a difference to the other person, who then can receive that, and they receive it like a gift.
Yeah.
And we're not in charge of how other people receive our actions, but we can certainly help them by listening out to what it is that they need, and asking, what is it that you need? And I think that breaking down the boxes blog that you've got there really is a signpost for me, that sometimes there are just little things that need to be done, and each one of us can play a little part in that, and the whole team is so much better as a team because of it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And as you said, it helps people feel seen. And at the end of the day, I think coming back to needs, we all want to be seen and heard. And so when we can do that in those small moments, it means so much more than the grand gestures sometimes as well.
Definitely.
So we're coming to the end of our time here, Curtis, and we've covered a fair bit of ground. But as you mentioned at the beginning, we are really continuing to evolve at a rapid pace. So if you could just encapsulate for me, another huge question coming your way, what do you think is going to be important for all pharmacist staff and businesses to thrive moving forward as we go into this next phase?
Look, I suppose it's a little bit preaching to the choir, Chantelle, talking to you about this, but I think it's that knowledge of and management of self, which comes back to that hard-won emotional intelligence. It takes coaching, and I've needed to see a psychologist myself for various things over various periods of my life. And the self-awareness that I made a joke of earlier has been very hard won, and it's taken a long time to get even to where I am, and I know I'm not there yet, but I think that management of self, which then leads into good time management, which then helps us to lead others and lead others well and thoughtfully and intentionally. And we have a wonderful pharmacist in our pharmacy who is a natural born leader, who never ever wants to be a manager, but displays such wonderful leadership qualities that I couldn't help but acknowledge it. And this particular pharmacist never thought of themselves as a leader, would never have thought of themselves, because they conflate the idea of leadership and management together.
Yeah.
And they're two completely different things.
Yeah.
And just like sometimes we don't get to choose who our mentors are. Sometimes the mentors come to us in times when we really need something or someone, and we realise that we like the way that this person articulates different things, and that person then, whether they intended to or not, actually becomes a mentor for us. And we traditionally think of a mentor, as certainly I always have, thought of a mentor as being somebody who is older and more experienced. And a lot of my mentors are people who are younger than me, who just have a particular skill set that I appreciate and would like to be able to develop in myself. And so I reach out to those people, and it just starts as a conversation, and not necessarily as an intention to develop a mentorship relationship. It's really just, tell me a little bit, I'm curious, tell me a little bit about how you got to this point, because I'd like to be able to do some of what you do. Or I like what you do and I'd like to see you do it for more people. Tell me how I can help other people like you're helping people. So I think that's where that comes from.
Incredible. And I think that mindset, it is win-win-win. You know, we grow ourselves, the stuff around us benefit, and then the businesses benefit as well, because, you know, we can't, I've said it 1,000 times before, you can't grow a business without growing people. And I think that's really what this all distills down to for me. So one last question before we finish up, and I do ask this for everyone. I am building the ultimate leaders toolbox, and I'm asking all of my guests if you could put one tool into this leadership toolbox, what would it be?
So this is one that I've definitely not a strength of mine, but it's something that I'm trying to develop, and that is listening with intention. I think when you spend a lot of time, particularly with Indigenous elders, a lot of our First Nations elders particularly will listen, then they will give some consideration to what you've just told them, and then they'll respond. And if you're in a family like mine, where we are used to thinking about how we're going to contribute to the conversation, and we start our contribution before the last person has finished talking, that can be really difficult to understand, and it can almost come across as not really knowing what's expected of you in that point, that these people don't really know how to communicate in our world. When the reality is it's an incredibly emotionally intelligent way to communicate, to listen, to think, and then to respond with your thoughts having been put together. And so I think for me, it would be that ability to listen with the intention of simply listening to understand, not listening to respond, but listening to really understand. And then if we listen to understand, sometimes no response is needed, and all that person wants is to feel heard. And rather than listening with our mouths, which is definitely something I've done a lot of in my time, we listen with our ears, and we listen and feel what it is that person is trying to convey. So it would be listening with intention, I think, Chantelle.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And, without that as a real foundation, it makes it really challenging to practice empathy and to be able to, inspire others and, and really understand, as you said. So an incredible addition. Thank you so much. Curtis, it has been an absolute pleasure. We could talk for hours. I know we could. And I just want to thank you for such practical insight into the way that you approach your frontline pharmacy role, but also, how you are helping others and also advocating through the PSS as well with our national leaders as well to really increase the conversation around that self-care and being able to collaborate and support each other, and in turn support and minimise loneliness and stress and all those other things that can be challenges for our workplace. So from me to you, thank you so much for everything that you do.
Well, thank you. It's easy when you love it, right? And I suppose that's one of the reasons why I like talking to you, because I can see that you love what you do as well. So, yeah, it's always a joy to be able to talk about that stuff that you love.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Curtis. I look forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on the Pharmacy View podcast. And don't forget to like, share, and leave us a comment if you found this episode of value or have feedback. Podcast episodes are promoted through social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, and major podcast mediums, and each episode can be found on the Pharmacy View webpage with links to guest contact and business details. If you're a pharmacist or industry support supplier who would like to join us on an episode, send us a message through LinkedIn or complete an inquiry form on the Pharmacy View webpage. I am your host, Chantelle Turner, pharmacist, leadership coach, and founder of Turn Pharmacy Leadership. And on behalf of Shopfront Solutions and Arion Technologies, thanks again for joining us today on the Pharmacy View podcast.